Should I be wearing a Terra Nova t-shirt?
No, it's fine.
Fine? Fine. Hey there, welcome to Terra Nova Church, or at least our website. Maybe you're thinking about visiting, and we're really excited about that. My name's Ashley, and I just want to give you a warm welcome. You're going to find so much information on our website about our building, where to park, what classes we offer for kids, for students, for groups, for women, for men, our beliefs, our values, our staff, so much. But if there's one thing I hope you leave this website with, it's that the people are the most important part. And when we ask our Terra Nova members and attenders, why did you come back? Why are you even still here? The response is overwhelming. I felt known. I felt seen. My kids felt cared for. And this is seen across the board. And we hope when you visit that you feel that as well. And a lot of this stems from the idea that we believe God knows us personally as the creator. So we're so excited for you to visit. And when you do, make sure you fill out our Terra Nova Connect card. We just want to be able to connect with you and say thanks. We're not going to sell your information. To be honest, I don't even know. Do you put it on eBay? I don't know how people do that. Either way, we won't. We just want to connect with you. So we can't wait for you to visit and check us out. We'll see you soon.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. You got me feeling like a Sunday. Oh, you got me feeling like a Sunday. Every day like a Sunday. You're giving me that Sunday vibe. Da, 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 da.
It was like springtime.
Let's sing this together. Lean into God's love tonight. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy out, and when brokenness and pain is all I've known, I won't be shaken. I won't be shaken, 'cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Shame no longer has a place to hide. Oh, I am not a captive to the lie. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. No, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, there's power. Oh, there's power. There's power that can break off every chain. Oh, there's power that can empty out the grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. Oh, let it break, let it break. There's power that can empty out the grave. It's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. Oh, 'cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, my fear doesn't stand. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Stand in your love. Stand in your love. Oh, I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand in your love. Oh, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. God, your love is such this amazing force that it drives out fear, God. It drives out anxiety. It drives out shame. God, all of the things that we tend to cling to in moments of pressure when the heat is on, God, all of those things that we run to, even though we know that they are so destructive to our souls, God, your love just obliterates them. And through all time, you have proven yourself a good and loving and gracious God. And we are carriers of that truth, that you have not changed, that you are still good, you are still kind, you are still full of grace and mercy. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. And all my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up till I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice, 'cause you have led me through the fire and darkest night. You were close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now and give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now and give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, you're so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful.
Well, hey, just want to thank you so much for joining us. I don't know about you, but I know that I really needed to hear the lyrics of that song because I know that my life oftentimes feels like I'm jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing. And, you're just taking care of things and just kind of sprinting to the next thing. But isn't it great to be able to take a moment and to pause and to accept the truth that God loves us, that He's faithful, that He's always by our side. So, man, it is just great to be together here at Turnover, whether you're watching online or you're here in person. Just so glad that you're all here. And we'd really love to hear from everybody. And the way that we do that here at Turnover is through what we call the Connect card. And there's a number of different ways that you can access that. Many of you have the Turnover app that's on your phone, and so it's really easy to fire up your phone, go to the app, and you'll find Connect card. You can go ahead and push the button and use it that way. If you're watching online, you'll also see a link that you can click. And then if you're here in person, we got one that you can use a pen. You can fill that one out as well. And as you're working on that, it's real simple. You just go ahead and start off by putting your name on it, and then you can go ahead and find some boxes to check, some blanks to fill in. Maybe give us an update on how you're doing. There's a space for you to write that in, or a place for you to write in a prayer request as well. And if you do have a prayer request, we've got a prayer team that will pray for that request. And so take some time to do that if you would. If it's your first time or you've been here just a few times, is that, boy, we just really love to hear from you and love to hear from everybody using that Connect card. And while you're working on that, we just want to let you know is that giving is really easy here at Turnover. There's 3 different ways to give. One is by using the Turnover app. You can also give online at ourturnover.com. You can go ahead and do that, or you can just mail a check to Turnover, or you can just walk it in, and that would be great. And that as you do, it's just all of us just continuing to keep the momentum going as we're using these resources to make God's love famous here in South Orange County and really all throughout the world. Now, if you're here either in person or you're here online, and maybe you're new to Turnover, maybe you've got a number of different questions about what Turnover is all about, and maybe one of the specific questions you have is, what are the people of Turnover all about? So if that's your question, I want to take a crack at that question in the form of a story. A little while back, we were doing at Turnover a men's retreat weekend. It was going to be up in the mountains. I was the one that was taking the lead of planning it, and I got a hold of a friend of mine who lives down in San Diego. His name is Jeff, to come and be our speaker. So what Jeff did and I is that a few weeks before the retreat, we sat down, kind of planned out his messages and talks, and then Jeff asked him the question. He said, here's what would really help me out as I prepare as a speaker. He said, could you describe the people of Turnover? You can only use one word. So I thought about that, and I said, well, Jeff, I guess if I could only use one word, I said the word that I would use is open. I said that the people at Turnover, they're just open. And so Jeff kind of went, oh. And then the next weekend had the retreat. He knocked the ball out of the park as a speaker. We got together again a couple days after the retreat just to debrief the experiences. Hey, do you remember when I asked you the question about, what are your people all about? And you said open. I said, yeah, I remember that. He said, that's exactly what I experienced too. And this openness that I see in the Turnover community, I just see it all the time, just in spades. I see, first off, an openness that people have to share the Turnover experience with their friends and family by inviting them to come in person to our gatherings or online. Wow, sharing the Turnover experience online, it's never been more easy to share the Turnover experience. And we've got some live gatherings at Saturday at 5 o'clock, and then we've added the Sunday at 9:30 to go along with the Sunday at 11 o'clock. So you can share that with your friends, or then you can also let them know that they can go on our YouTube page and get great content from Turnover just any time that they want. And so not only open to just sharing Turnover with their friends, but I also see people in our community open to serving. And we've got a great event that's coming up that's just perfect for that, and we call it Fix It Day. It's coming up on Saturday, March the 6th, and we're going to be taking that Saturday morning, starting off with a breakfast. We're going to be gathering up into teams, and then we're going to be going out into the community, serving some single-parent families that are in our community. And what we're going to be doing is kind of helping them with some things that are around the house that need some repairing and kind of need a little bit of attention to. And it's just going to be a great event, and it's for everyone. It's for Fix-It pros, and it's for those of us that can barely tell the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver, all right? So, go ahead, wide playing field. We'd love to have everybody come out on Sunday, March the 6th for Fix-It Day. In order to get into play, it's real easy. You can, again, use that Terra Nova app. You'll find Fix-It Day there. Go ahead and click the button. It'll give you more information about the day and a way to sign up. Or if it's easier for you, just use that Connect card that I talked to you about. You'll see a Fix-It Day box that you can check, and then we'll be in touch with you, give you the information that you need. We've got a few weeks to prepare, and then we're all going to have an awesome time serving together at Fix-It Day. Well, again, just wanted to thank you all just so much for coming, and now let's dive into part 3 of Starting Point.
You ever made a mess that was so big you didn't even know where to begin cleaning it up? Ever just been faced with a mess that it's just such a bad mess? Really what you want to do is just turn around and walk away. I painted my way through college and grad school, painting houses with my future father-in-law. And one summer day, I was up on a ladder painting under some eaves with a sprayer, and the spray unit was around the corner on the patio on a tarp with the suction nozzle stuck in a 5-gallon bucket of paint. And as I was up on the ladder, I was kind of needing a little more, room with the line. And so I was giving it a little bit of tug to get where I wanted to go when I felt it give way. And then I heard the sound of the spray unit sucking air. And my heart just stopped. I slid down the ladder as fast as I could, ran around the corner, and there was the spray unit tipped over, and the 5-gallon bucket of paint tipped over onto the drop cloth, emphasis on the word cloth, and then oozing out beyond the cloth as well. And I grabbed the unit as quickly as I could, put it on a dry tarp, grab a trash can, a plastic trash can. I scoop up this tarp now filled with gallons of paint as it's spilling out all over me and all over the concrete, and I drop it in this trash can, and then I stand there staring at probably a 6-foot diameter puddle of paint seeping into this guy's concrete patio in the summer sun. And honestly, my first thought was, pack up all of the paint gear, put it in my car, drive away, and never, ever, ever come back. I mean, forget the money, just leave. A guy was telling me a story. He said he was in his kitchen, in his pantry one day, and he accidentally knocked this gallon-sized jar of salsa off of the top shelf. Where do you even get that? It's a Costco, I don't know, Smart and Final thing, this restaurant-sized gallon jar of salsa onto the tile floor. He said it exploded. It was amazing. It was remarkable. It exploded up. And immediately a gallon of salsa covers the ceiling, all of the shelves, all of the food, all the boxes, the cans, there's glass everywhere. He said it was like a salsa bomb had exploded. And he hears the sound of his wife running down, or coming down the stairs like, what happened? And he backs out of the pantry, and as his wife comes around the corner looking at him, he closes the door and says, honey, we're selling the house. Like, we're moving. Just put a padlock on that. The buyers don't even need to know. Have you ever made a mess or had been faced with a mess that was just so big, so bad, you didn't even know where to begin cleaning up? Really, it would have been easier to walk away, forget about it. And for some of you, maybe your minds went immediately to another kind of mess, like a relational mess, or a financial mess, or just a personal life mess. Well, we're in part 3 of our series, Starting Point. And at the beginning of the series, we made a rather obvious statement that everything has a starting point. All of your habits, bad and good, had a starting point. Your relationships all had a starting point. Your career path, your education, you had a starting point. The universe had a starting point. Everything has a starting point. But what we probably don't think about very much is that our faith has a starting point as well. And for most of us, that starting point was somewhere in our childhood. Whether or not you were raised in a Christian home, maybe it started in your home, or maybe it was your neighbor's home or something like that. But ideas or beliefs began to form about God or spiritual things. It was your friend down the street and they took you to Sunday school. It was a religious school that your parents made you go to. It was your grandma. It was a friend. It was church, mosque, synagogue. But some exposure to something, there are ideas and beliefs that began to form around spiritual, God-like things. And then, we've been saying in this series, then something happened. You grew up. You grew up, but very often our ideas about God do not grow up with us. As we mature, our ideas of God don't mature, and consequently, our childhood faith so often falters when faced with the rigors and challenges and questions and pain and struggles of young adulthood and adulthood. And it's almost like we need a new starting point of faith now as adults, like a restart button for adults. But where to begin? Where do you start or restart a journey like that? Well, believe it or not, the first followers of Jesus did not start with the Bible and stories of the Bible, stories of Adam and Eve and Noah and the ark and David and Goliath and such. They didn't start with the Bible because for the first 300 years of the Jesus movement, there actually was no the Bible. It didn't exist, at least not in this form. Instead, they always began with a person and an event. A person and an event. And in week 1, we said that really, I think, is the starting point. The starting point is actually a question. And it's a simple question. Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? And there are a lot of other great questions, important questions, challenging questions that we should ask and wrestle with and wonder about. But the starting point question that I think we all need to wrestle to the ground as adults is, who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Now, as I said, we're going to cycle back to that question in a few weeks in the series. And by the way, if you missed any part of the series, you need to catch up. You need to push pause now and go back and watch some other episodes, catch the whole series. And you can catch the whole series now at our website, www.terranova.com/starting point. Just go there each week. We'll add to that, and you can catch all of the topics there. You can share it with friends. You can watch them again if you want to wrestle with these ideas a little bit more. But we started with this question, who is Jesus? And then last week, we began to take a detour. And I think it's an important detour. It's a detour that will lead us back around to the point where we can answer that question in a way that makes a little more sense. But last week, we talked about this word, this ugly 3-letter word that we've all heard of called sin. Now, we don't like that word. It's a very condemning word. It's a very negative word. So we don't use that word ever. In fact, we much prefer an alternative word, mistakes. Mistakes. I may have made a mistake. I admit I've made mistakes. I'll admit that was a mistake. We really prefer the word mistakes. But as we said last week, mistakes, it's a comfortable word. It's maybe a preferable word, but it doesn't really cover it, does it? It doesn't cover all of it because sometimes, as we said last week, sometimes we mistake on purpose. Wanted to, meant to, knew it, did it anyway. In fact, many of us have actually planned some of the mistakes we made. A premeditated mistake? Can there really even be such thing? We've planned, we've prepared for mistakes, we've purchased things for mistakes. We have a place, some of us, where we keep or we hide some of our mistakes. And most of us, in fact, I would suggest that probably all of us at a number of times in our lives have actually repeated mistakes. Some of them over and over and over and over, knowing that we were doing it. And last week we just decided, you know what, we need to come clean about this word because mistakes, can't we just be honest as adults? This does not cut it, does it? And just maybe a baby step for us in this journey would be to admit, I am not a serial mistaker. Just maybe I am a sinner. Just maybe. And we define, you know what that word is? We define it very loosely last week. It's not a theological definition. It's really a simple definition to help some of us maybe cross this line, cognitively speaking. A sinner is someone who knows something's harmful, does it anyway. Knows something might hurt someone else or hurt myself or hurt a relationship, might ripple negatively into the world around me. Want to do it anyway. Sound like anybody you know? Actually, it sounds a lot like me. In fact, that's me, and I think it's you. But it's not just us, and it's not just a couple of us or a few of us. It's actually all of us, and I mean like all 8 billion of us, all mistaking and mistaking and mistaking over and over and over, knowing it, doing it anyway. And I think we would all agree that we collectively as humanity have messed the world up and continue to mess it up to this day in just about every way imaginable. And we have been doing so for about as long as there have been humans. And so you might say that God was faced with a dilemma, if you can even say that. Like, what do you do when there's a mess that is just so bad that you don't even know where to begin? And it's everywhere, and it's in everything and in everyone. What do? You just put a padlock on the pantry and sell the house? Do you stick all the painting supplies in your car and drive away? Does God put an out of order sign on the planet and just move on? Or does he roll up his sleeves and get involved? And God, because he cared, because he loved, he chose to get involved. And like we all have to do when addressing a mess that's so bad you don't know where to begin, he had to start somewhere. And this might be interesting to you, 3 of the world's great faith traditions all say that he started in the very same place with a man named Abraham. Now, Abraham is so important to what might be called the history of religions, such a central figure in so many people's journeys, that today we're going to take a brief look at this man's story, especially a moment in his story as told in a very ancient document known as Genesis, which is Hebrew for the word beginnings. And as I tell this story, I just want to be clear. If you're trying to figure out God, or you're like, I need a new starting point, I just want to say, I don't necessarily expect you to believe this story in its entirety. Listen, you may believe that this document is 100% true. You might believe that. You might think, well, there's probably some historical truth to this document. In fact, most historians of the ancient world think that's certainly true, but probably not inspired. Or it might be like your freshman literature professor said, you might be influenced by that to just go, hey, it's all just great storytelling. It's ancient myth. It's metaphor. I don't necessarily mean right now to change your mind about what you think about that, but there's something that happens in this scene that I think touches on something we have all felt, regardless of what you think or believe about the Bible. And that is this tension. If there is a God, and maybe you've actually thought this in very specific ways, if there is a God, if there's something more, if there is a divine being, if there's something to that, how are we doing? Where do I stand? Am I okay? And how do I know? How do I even begin to know where I stand in relation to whatever that is? And in a real sense, that is the question of religion. How do I know, and how am I related to whatever else there is? So, according to the story, sometime around 2000 BC, in fact, most historians would agree that there's at least basic truth to this. 2000 BC, roughly around that time, God chose a man named Abram as his starting point. Now, this is what's interesting about Abram is there's actually nothing particularly special, nothing particularly wonderful or even good about Abraham. He is a polytheistic, idol-worshiping guy from ancient Sumer, from the city of Ur, a major city, a famous city in the ancient world in modern day Iraq. He's a childless guy, which means there's a kind of stigma attached to him. And he's a guy who's very prone to try to take matters into his own hand and mess things up. Anything but perfect, kind of like us. In fact, there's a scene, we're not going to get too deep into this, but there's a scene in his life where he's traveling into Egypt, and traveling was very dangerous in the ancient world, very, very dangerous. He's traveling into Egypt, and as Abraham is about to enter Egypt, he looks over at his wife Sarai, and he says this to her. He says, "Hey, hun, I know you're really beautiful, and when the Egyptians see, when these guys see you, they're going to want you, and they're going to think, I'm your husband, and so in order to take you, they're going to kill me. So instead, I got an idea. Let's just say you're my sister. And then because I'm your brother, I'll be treated well when they take you, and I will live because of you." Boo. I mean, can we just say a collective boo, Abraham? And so it turns out Sarai, his wife, gets stuck in Pharaoh's harem. When the truth comes out, Pharaoh ends up schooling Abraham about integrity. It is not a great moment in the history of husbands. And Abraham is that kind of guy. He is imperfect. He struggles. He believes. He doubts. And by the way, just as a side note, this is not typical of ancient literature. The heroes of ancient literature are not depicted as super flawed individuals. They are depicted as heroic and perfect and courageous, but not Abraham. He is a struggling guy, but God chooses Abraham, and he says to him, and I really love this. Here's how the story of Abraham begins. Genesis chapter 12. The Lord said to Abram, this is before, his name eventually is changed to Abraham, says to him, Go from your own country, go from your own people, your father's household. In other words, leave everything that you've ever known, leave your comfort zone, leave your family, leave your roots, leave your business connections, leave everything you've ever known, and I want you to go to the land, get this, I love this, the land I will show you. In other words, you start walking, I'll tell you when we get there. Now, there is not a lot in there for Abraham to go home and tell his wife, like, hey, honey, pack up, we're leaving, where are we going? God only knows. There's not a lot in there for, and wives tend to like to hear about such things. I mean, talk about a trust exercise, right? To the land I will show you. And then God makes Abraham a promise, or actually 3 promises. And here's what God says to him. And I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. Real quick, just press pause there. Anybody, and you can play if you're in the room, or actually I see you on the couch, you can play along as well. Anybody ever heard of the nation Israel before? Anybody ever heard of Israel or Israelites, the people of Israel? Anybody ever heard of the Arab peoples before and the Arab nations? Yeah, both people groups trace their lineage back to this childless man. Isn't that amazing? I will make you into a great nation. And then he says, and I will make your name great. Let's play again. Anybody, before you walked in here and heard me talking about Abraham, before you ever walked in here, anyone ever heard of the name Abraham before? And I don't mean Abraham Lincoln. I mean this guy, Abraham. Yeah, Abraham. 4,000 years later, we've all heard of Abraham. Here's another one. Anyone ever hear of Shulgi? Shulgi, son of Ur-Nama? Big time king. He was the king of Sumer in Ur, 3rd dynasty of Ur, circa 2000 BC, reigned for 46 years. He was a major player in the ancient world. Anyone? No? Nothing. On Shulgi? Now here, isn't this interesting? Shulgi was famous. You've never heard of him. Abram was nobody, and you have. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that kind of amazing? And then comes the most amazing promise of them all, promise number 3. And it says, and I will bless you, and I will bless those who bless you. And I will curse those who curse you. In other words, I'm going to have your back. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to be with you. And then he says this, and all peoples on earth. I wonder how Abraham even wrapped his head around that. All peoples or people groups or nations on earth will be blessed through you. All nations, all people groups on the planet, Abram will be blessed or will be better because of you or through you. And though this whole thing is a hot mess, I am going to make it better. And I'm going to make it better, Abram, through you. Because of you. Something will happen through you, through your family, through the nation that will come from you. I have a plan. I have a plan, and I will bless all the families, all the nations on earth. And so, we're told, Abram went. 75 years old, he bets the farm on God. He went as the Lord told him, with more questions than answers, with way more to lose, we might think, than he has to gain. He leaves everything behind. He leaves civilization. He begins this journey with, by the way, Lot, who was his nephew, went with him. We'll come back to that in a second. And Abraham, in this moment, forever becomes like a model, an archetype of the kind of relationship that God, your heavenly Father, wants to have with all of this. And this especially comes out in a key statement that's part of a following scene. It's a statement that, it's this statement that I think intersects with all of us, with our stories and our questions with all of us as our lives kind of play out. It's a number of years that have passed. Abraham's getting a little older, Genesis chapter 15, and we're told after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in some kind of vision or dream after this. Now, what's the this? Well, this is interesting. Remember that Lot kid, Abraham's nephew? Yeah. Abraham brought Lot with him, probably shouldn't have, because God told him to leave his family and his father's household behind. But here's this, here's my no good nephew, Lot, and, he's always getting himself into trouble. He's got nothing better to do. And so we might as well pack up his couch and Xbox and bring it along too, so let's bring him too, because he doesn't have anything else to do. And Lot comes along with him. He's constantly getting into trouble. Abraham's always bailing him out. And in the scene right before this scene, Genesis chapter 14, Lot and his family get caught in the middle of a territorial dispute between 9 different kings, 4 on one side against 5 on the other. And the 4 more powerful kings defeat the 5 kings. They cart off everything of value, and they cart off all of the people into slavery, which was just the way wars were fought in the ancient world. And that included Lot and his family. They get captured and dragged into slavery. And Abraham hears about this. He's like, well, I gotta rescue. He's my nephew. I gotta help him out. And so Abram musters this army of about 300 men, and they go chasing after the 4 kings in the middle of the night, and they end up routing them. They catch them when they were least expecting anything, and they defeat them. He rescues Lot. He rescues all of the people who were captured, sets them free, scoops up all of the stolen goods, and ends up giving it all back to the kings that it was taken from. And then I imagine Abram went back to his tent, and as the adrenaline subsides, he thinks to himself, what have I done? What did I just do? I picked a fight with 4 very powerful kings. I kicked a hornet's nest, kings that are way more powerful than that. I'm nobody. I'm a childless nomad wandering around in a land I'm not even from here, and I didn't even keep any of the spoils, which I could have. I ended up giving them all back because I thought integrity and what. Did I just blow it? Did I just blow it? After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in some vision in the night. And the message he gets is a simple one. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. In fact, that phrase right there is actually the most repeated line in all of the documents that are collected in this thing we call the Bible. The most repeated line, and maybe you need to hear it today. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. The voice continues, I am your shield. I'm your protection. I've got you. After this incredible experience you just had, I'm your shield. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be afraid. Abram would again and again forget that line and try to take control of things, but you don't have to. I'm your shield, and I am your very great reward. In other words, you just gave up what you thought was a great reward as a matter of integrity. I just want you to know you don't have to be afraid, because I am your reward. But I love this. Abram is not completely convinced. This is so great. It's so authentic. It's so real. He says back in this vision, he says, Sovereign Lord, so you're my reward? So I don't have to worry about anything? Exactly what can you give me? Since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus, my servant. You've given me no children. What exactly are you going to give me? My servant in my household is going to become my heir. In other words, God is like, hey, don't worry, Abraham, I'll take care of everything. And Abraham's like, I hate to state the obvious. And, respectfully, may I just say, you haven't really taken care of anything yet. You promised me a nation. God, I'd settle for a child, an heir, just one. I don't need a nation. I would just take a child. My servant is going to get my estate. I have no one else in my life. In other words, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. You ever feel that way? Felt that way maybe recently? Like I was praying back in January and now it's February and I don't know, I'm not seeing it. I was praying back last January 2020, and now it's February 2021 and I just feel like I'm not seeing it. I'm just not seeing it. So that's what Abraham says in this vision back to God. And here's what the writer of Genesis says that God said to Abraham. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man, Eliezer, he will not be your heir, but a son who's your own flesh and blood. He will be your heir. You will have a son. And then in this vision, he's taken outside of his tent, out in the dark. And dark, I mean dark like it's never here, like never ever here. And he looks up and the Milky Way galaxy is spread out above him in the night sky like a Jackson Pollock painting. I mean, it's just splattered with stars. Have you ever been somewhere where you can actually see stars? Like the Milky, like all of them, right? I mean, say in Orange County, and the vision says, look up at the stars and see if you can count them. And in Orange County, we could, right? It's like, there's 5. No, that was a plane. Okay, there's 4. I can count 4 stars. I mean, we could actually count them. But he's staring up at a sky that you couldn't even begin to count the stars. It's like the more you stare at them, the more you see. And the vision, God says to him, so shall your offspring be. In other words, I know you don't even have a son yet, and I know it's not happening on your timeline, and you're feeling anxious, and like the clock is ticking, and you need to get moving, and I want you to trust me with something that you are going to have a very hard time trusting me with. Your offspring will be like the stars in the night sky. And in that moment, staring up at the stars, Abram makes a decision that establishes the pattern for relating to, for reconnecting with God from this time forward. And the story says, and in that moment, as he's staring at the stars, Abram believed. Abram believed the Lord. He believed that promise. He believed what God was saying to him in this vision, a promise that on the one hand makes no sense. It seems impossible, out of his control. He's anxious. He's afraid. He's left everything. He's in a land where he doesn't even belong. But in that moment, he says, okay, I trust you. I believe you. I trust you. And then the writer of Genesis makes a statement that's so key. It's a statement that indicated the starting point for humanity's relationship with God. Abram believed the Lord, and God, credited to him as righteousness. Now that word righteousness is just a huge, huge word that so often comes up in the documents that are found in the scriptures. Righteousness, and here's what righteousness means. Often around here we'll say that sin is basically everything that's messed up in the world and everything that's messed up in me. A really large category of things. Everything that's messed up in the world, everything that's messed up in me. And righteousness in a real sense is the reversal of that. It's everything being made right in the world and in me and in my relationships with others, in my relationship with God, everything being made right again. And just as sin, as we said last week, always separates. It always separates, it always breaks, it always damages people and relationships. Righteousness is like everything being made right again. Everything being made right once more with us, with others, with God. And God looks at Abram. God looks at Abram in this moment and he says, you trust me. You really trust me, Abram. That's righteousness. That's righteousness. That's what makes us right. That's what makes our relationship right. And here's what's so key, so important about that. Not religion. There's no religion in the story. There are no rules, no rituals, no requirements. There are no hoops that Abraham has to jump through. The text does not say Abraham obeyed the rules. And Abraham obeyed the 10 commandments and the 100 of other commandments that were in there were no commandments. Moses and the law wouldn't come along for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it does not say, and Abram went to temple. And he offered the sacrifices, and he memorized the scriptures, and he fasted and prayed and did religious stuff. There was no religion. None of that even existed. What it says is so simple and so beautiful. Abram, what? What's the word? He believed. He believed. He bet the farm on God. Now that word believe is a powerful word. It's a powerful word because what we believe taps into the very operating system of our lives, the way we've pieced it all together, the things that we assume and believe to be true about the way things are and the way things will be, and nothing determines our direction more than our beliefs. And Abraham says, I trust you. I trust you. I trust you enough to follow you. I believe you, even though it doesn't add up. And God's like, wait, I'm sorry, say that again. You what? You what? You believe? You believe? I've been waiting to hear someone say that since the day this mess began. Abraham, that's righteousness. That's the basis of our relationship. And that belief, that act of trust established a pattern for relating to God from that point forward. That trusting God resulted in a right relationship with God. Trusting God resulted in a right relationship with God. Trusting God was and is the starting point for a relationship with God, because this is so important. Healthy relationships are never based on doing and performing and appeasing and jumping through hoops and checking off boxes. Healthy, great relationships are never based on those kinds of things. Great relationships are always based on trust. On trust. Isn't that true? I mean, we kind of all know that, right? It is nearly impossible for you to have a great relationship with someone who does not trust you. And it is almost impossible for you to have a great relationship with them if you don't trust them. And it's always been that way. It's always been that way from the very beginning of the story. Trust. It was always about trust. And then religion came along. Religion after religion after religion, including, by the way, the Christian religion. And maybe you've heard the statement before that all religions are basically the same. Maybe you've heard people say that before. And to some extent, it's kind of true because all religions essentially acknowledge that something's wrong. There is some kind of disconnection between us and the divine, whatever the divine is defined to be, however that's understood. But something's broken, something's disconnected, something's wrong. And all religions acknowledge that it has something to do with us. Like we are messed up and we have messed things up, and all religions propose a way to reconnect us. In fact, the word religion, literally from the Latin ligament, means to connect again or to reconnect. All religions propose a way to restore that sense of connection with the divine, and they all have their own lists. And the lists simply go like this: do all the right things, believe all the right beliefs, pray the right prayers, say the right words, sacrifice the right offerings, meditate in the right ways, and on the list could go. Celebrate or honor the right days. And the idea behind religion is if you do it all right enough and long enough, consistently enough, purely enough, you just might become right. And things might become right. And you know what? There's a real appeal to that. There's a real appeal to that, to the rigor of it. It should be hard. I mean, shouldn't it? People should have to work for it, shouldn't they? And everything in us, something in us kind of leans in this direction of rightness with God. it should be earned by doing the right things, by being good enough. And everything we learn from religion and school and sports and work, and often our very own families of origin, seem to support that idea. And yet we all know that healthy relationships, great relationships, the relationships that we love, the relationships that feel like home to us, they're all based on trust. Great relationships are never based on performance or appearance. They're based on trust. And when God started a relationship with Abram, he did not start with religion. He did not show up with rules or requirements or rituals. The only thing he asked of Abraham is, will you trust me? Will you trust me? Will you trust me? Will you trust me, Abraham? Will you trust me enough to go on this wild journey with me into the unknown? Will you believe me enough for that? Will you trust me even when it doesn't add up, even when you can't see how? Just one thing, Abram. Will you trust me completely? And at the very beginning of the story, it's there for all of us to see. Before religion ever got into it, God establishes the model for a healthy, a right relationship between us, the starting point. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Now, I can already sense it. There's pushback, right? Some of you are like, hey, wait a minute, can we raise our hands? I mean, we're at home. Would you see me? Because here's what I know you're thinking. Aren't there rules? I mean, come on. Aren't there supposed to be rules? Don't we have to believe the right things and say the right things and pray the right ways and do it? There are, I mean, come on. There are rules, aren't there? I mean, we still have to do all that stuff, don't we? And that is a great, great question. And the answer is, do not miss next week and part 4 of our series, Starting Point. But here's where I want to take us today as we end. The question I want to end with today, for you to think about through the course of this week, and a simple question: what if the starting point for a relationship with God is trust? What if the starting point of a relationship with God really is as simple and as real and as relational as that, as trust? And what if God wants from all of us the very same thing he wanted from Abram? What if what he wants from all of us is to walk out of our tents, proverbially speaking, and look up at the stars, whatever that means for you, whatever's going on in your life, whatever you're facing, whatever the unknown is, whatever is out of control, like in your own way, to look up at the stars and say, I believe you. I trust you. Not just I believe in you, or I believe certain facts about you. That's not what trust is in a relationship. I believe you. I trust you. And it doesn't even seem possible that you could ever put my life back together. It doesn't seem possible that your plan for my life could even still be in play as much as I've messed it up, that your dream for me could still come true. It doesn't even seem possible that this mess that I've made could ever get cleaned up. I don't even see how. I don't see how, but I trust you. I trust you. I'm in. I'm all in. And do you know why that God wants our trust first and foremost? It's really simple. Because what he wants is relationship, not religion. What he wants is relationship, a healthy, great relationship with you based on trust. And so as imperfect as Abram was, as up and down, oh my goodness, as flawed, as like messing things up, Abram looks up at the stars and says, I believe you. I trust you. And God says, that's what I'm looking for. Trust, Abram. That's righteousness. Now, we will pick it up right there next week. Please don't miss part 4 of our series. But I want to leave you, as I've been doing week to week, with a couple of questions. So as you tune out on your couch, before you click it off, maybe these are a couple of conversations you can have. Or if you're here in person on the car on the way home, just for something for you to mill over and play along. And the first question is this. It's a little bit of a longer question. Have you ever felt like your relationship with God might be depending on you doing the right things, believing the right beliefs, saying the right prayers, jumping through the right hoops, going through the right motions, being good enough, and so forth. Have you ever believed that? If so, why? If not, why not? And maybe, just maybe being honest, for you, you kind of still do. This is kind of still in there. There's some of that in you. So how are you doing with that? So that's one conversation to have. The second one is a lot more simple, but it's a great question. How do you know when someone really believes something? How do you know when they really believe? Can you know when someone really believes something? And if so, how? So think about it, talk about it, and then we'll see you back next week for part 4 of our series. Let's take a moment and just close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you, that you revealed something so simple so long ago that continues to resonate with me and with so many people. And that really from the very beginning, it all was always about relationship. And it was always about trust and never about religion. I just want to thank you for that. And personally, I want to lean into it, and maybe many of us listening along would just love, even if we're not sure what we believe about you, would love to say, if that's true, I would love to begin there. That would be a place where I can begin. And then for all of us, God, for many of us that are standing in the middle of a mess of our own making, and there are things going on in our lives that are just so messed up, we don't even know where to begin. We don't know how they would ever be made right. In this moment, Heavenly Father, I pray for every person in a situation like that, and just inviting them to lean into you. I pray that as they do, as they trust you in the middle of that mess, that you would not only begin to make them right, and your relationship right, but you would begin to help them make their world right, their lives right. And I pray that for all of us, that we would be people who walk through this life making things right, because that's what you love. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, hey, before you tune out, before you sign off, please take a moment to fill out that Connect card. And before you leave, please take a moment to grab the paper cards that are sitting around you. We'd love to hear from you. If it's your first time checking us out online or in the room, thank you so much for spending part of your weekend or your week, as it may be, with us. We'd love to hear from you as well. And of course, for all of those who call Terra Nova home, we invite you to give as we head into this new year. Have this sense that our generosity in the world is going to be just as important, maybe more important than ever before, and it's our collective generosity that makes that possible. And so you can give on our app, of course, on our website, and you can always mail checks in or bring them by our office. Thank you so much for your generosity during the season. It means so much. And don't forget, while we're speaking of being generous, that we're generous with our lives as well, and one of those ways to do that is the Fix It Day. You can sign up on the app or on our website. That's coming up on March 6th on a Saturday morning. So sign up for that. And then also don't forget, we have now opened up a new service outdoors at 9:30. We call it Sunshine Sundays. It's beautiful out there, wide open spaces, and we would love to actually see you in person if you want to come by and join us outdoors on Sundays, 9:30 and 11. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week for part 4 of Starting Point.